In case you haven't been watching the news, there's a lot going on in the world right now. People are out in the streets of Tehran defying authority in previously unimaginable ways. A much smaller Ukraine has been militarily trouncing and invading Russian former Cold War superpower over triple its size. And China is exploding at the seams with protests, the likes of which we haven't seen for decades. History can't yet tell us whether this is just a period of transition and heavy upheaval, or if it's the birth of a new era of full-on revolution. But it seems like extreme transition is in the air everywhere, even in the comparatively mild and pedestrian tech sector. The long disacknowledged and obfuscated but ironclad monopolies of the tech giants are also beginning to disintegrate like so many flakes of rust in the wind. The only question is whether real crypto dares to stage that Washington Crossing the Delaware moment, or if we just let new monopolists come in and continue the oppressive extraction of rents. Ready? Let's go. Today, we're going to discuss why Apple is very deserving of your scorn, the Chapter 11 bankruptcy of BlockFi, to which I say good riddance, a very popular crypto influencer suffering blowback for his heavy promotion of that CeFi platform, Fidelity launching their crypto retail operation, and World Mobile going stateside. If the warm and sunny day in this image looks extremely inviting because you're in a snow-covered part of the world, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. First off, allow me to make it clear that I'm not in any way comparing what's happening in Ukraine or Iran or China with anything that's happening or that could happen in tech or in crypto. But I am inspired by the struggle for freedom of the people in those places. And I take it as a grave insult to the human rights of all humans for any American company to collaborate with anybody trying to oppress any of those peoples. You might have seen a lot of posts about Apple today. This one says, protesters have been using airdrop to bypass censorship and share information about protests. Apple has a vested interest in making sure its factory is fully staffed to get new iPhones out in time for Christmas. I don't know how true all that is or the timing of Christmas iPhones, but there are headlines out there like this one. Apple restricts airdrop file sharing in China that protesters have used. Protests over China's strict COVID-19 restrictions have intensified in recent days. This post gets a little bit more into the details, saying Apple has released a software update limiting the use of airdrop in China in light of recent protests. Airdrop was being used by protesters to transmit info directly phone to phone, bypassing the Great Firewall of China. And here you can see some representations of what this looks like in China right now versus the rest of the world. Defenders of Apple were quick to point out that maybe those changes went into effect before the most recent very intense protests in China. But there's more to that story, as described here by former FCC Commissioner Ajit Pai. You might remember him for the actions he took while he was in the FCC that were viewed by many to be very anti-net neutrality. And in fact, I retweeted this tweet of his earlier today, and I just made a small reference to his infamy for his stances that have definitely been described as anti-net neutrality by many, and he blocked me for it. Even though I was agreeing with him, he actually blocked me for just mentioning in a small parenthetical that he was infamous for his positions on net neutrality. I'm actually perfectly okay with anyone on Twitter blocking anyone else, including me. But I'm particularly proud of this one because Commissioner Pai is by far the highest ranking former US official to ever block me on Twitter. But he does describe this pretty well. He says, on November 9th, Apple released iOS 16.1.1. One change applied only to iPhones sold in China. AirDrop's everyone setting lasts only for 10 minutes, limiting direct connections and hobbling a tool that has been an effective communication tool for protesters. And he's quoting and screenshotting a Yahoo Finance article here that says, but why did Apple rush out the change unannounced in an unassuming update to iOS in early November and applied only to Chinese iPhones. One clue may lie in what happened the month prior when Xi Jinping's appointment to a third term as China's leader was met with rare displays of public dissent. In the most visible protest, a dissident known as Bridgeman lit a fire on a bridge in Beijing to draw attention to his protest banners. One read, "Go on strike at school and work, remove dictator and national traitor Xi Jinping." References to the banners were quickly censored across the Chinese internet, but photos still made their way through private channels. Vice reported that Bridgeman's messages were spreading on the Shanghai subway via airdrop. And so you can see how the timing might have worked here. The protesters, certain types of protesters, or perhaps future protesters, were already using airdrop quite a while ago, quite a while before these recent very intense protests. So, how is all this working out for Apple in China? Well, Journo at the National, an adjunct professor at George Washington University, Joyce Karam, has this to say: protests getting out of hand at Foxconn iPhone plant tonight, where workers are rebelling against COVID harsh restrictions and work environment. I'm sure the authorities love it when the protesters take their own barricades and use them to pelt the authorities in their little anti-COVID suits. I wish those were the only items we could identify where it seems that Apple is very anti-consumer, including being very anti-freedom of speech. If we look down here, Library, who you'll remember from the coverage of their regulatory case, says, during COVID, Apple demanded our apps filter some search terms from being returned. If we did not filter the terms, our apps would not be allowed in the store. Apple may make good products, but they have been opposed to free speech for some time. And those of you who've been thinking about Apple for a few years may remember this video made by Fortnite a couple of years ago, I believe in 2020, where they depicted sort of an anthropomorphic apple head person, kind of rotten with a worm coming out of the side of his head, doing his best 1984 impression, telling the world how they were in charge and they kind of know what's best for everybody, until the only person with any colorfulness to them comes into the room and throws a giant unicorn staff at the TV, breaking it, and walks out. And then Epic Games, the maker of Fortnite, flashed this on the screen. Epic Games has defied the App Store monopoly. In retaliation, Apple is blocking Fortnite from 1 billion devices. Join the fight to stop 2020 from becoming 1984. You might also be aware of things like this. Apple takes a 30% tax from app developers who make over 1 million through the App Store on an annual basis. Apple's App Store is the equivalent of a 30% tax on the internet. Elon says Apple has also threatened to withdraw Twitter from its App Store, but won't tell us why. And then he proposed a poll. Apple should publish all censorship actions it has taken that affects its customers. What do you want to bet? That will never, ever happen. And the poll was very much in favor of yes. A couple of your fellow members of the Army of Spies, who you might recognize from the comments below these videos, also were able to add some topics. Grayskull reminded us, don't forget their fervent hatred and takedown attempts of right to repair. I personally hate that one. David M. Jensen said, reminds me of your episode explaining how Apple blocks any NFT app that tries to change the user experience based on which NFT your wallet holds, which was a theme that even Brian Armstrong commented on, not of course in my thread, but in another thread about Apple that Elon Musk put up. He said, for what it's worth, Apple has censored quite a lot of functionality in crypto apps, including buying NFTs. They want 30%, but there is no way to send crypto through their in-app payments, and even browsing third-party decentralized apps, dApps, which are essentially websites. I covered this in a whole video, this phenomenon that both Brian Armstrong, who, if you don't know, is the CEO and founder of Coinbase, and David M. Jensen are talking about. Basically, Apple realized they were missing out on income because people were using apps in the App Store to sell NFTs. Sometimes, as Brian Armstrong points out, even just directing them to a dApp, which in a lot of cases is just a website. And Apple wasn't having it. They didn't want to lose out on their 30% anywhere and any way. So they basically made it not possible to have an app in the App Store if it involved any kind of NFT that would allow for greater user function. If you were holding an NFT that allowed for greater function in that app for the user was holding an NFT, then they weren't going to allow that app, which is smart if you're blindly trying to hold on to your 30% rent-seeking behavior, because then you couldn't have crypto companies selling NFTs outside of the App Store that allow users to get more function out of an app that's available in the App Store. Of course, Apple's going to come up with some very persuasive explanation about how, somehow it had to limit the functionality of airdrop just in China. And certainly it wasn't collaborating with the CCP to suppress all of the people of China. They're going to come out with something, and a lot of people are going to buy it. But what this company has shown us time and time again is that they are willing to do things like that. They are willing to suppress free speech. They are willing to prevent consumers from being able to fix their phones. They are willing to blindly go after that 30%, even if it means crippling the flourishing of Web3, at least on their platform. And that's the important part. They only control their ecosystem. It's time that crypto drops Apple. I know this will be very painful for a lot of you that have had Apple products forever, don't want to leave your Apple products. You're addicted to your Apple products. You love them. I get that. But their behavior is not consistent with where crypto wants to go. It's time that crypto separates itself from Apple. Apple is not trying to go to the same future where everyone competes on the same beneficial level economic playing field. Apple wants to maintain its hegemony and its monopoly over not just its share of the hardware world, but its share of everything: software, dApps, even revenue from NFTs. They don't, as Brian Armstrong points out, they don't even know how to get that money. But if they can't get it, they don't want anybody to get it. This company, the way it behaves, is not consistent with the goals of crypto. Sadly, the centralized tech giants are not the only ones we need to divorce ourselves from. We've also got our old friend who keeps coming back to haunt us: centralized finance, CFI, this time in the form of BlockFi. Here is the Kroll restructuring page where you can get all the info about their Chapter 11 voluntary petition under the bankruptcy code. So BlockFi is now officially in bankruptcy, and you'll see reports out there right now saying the hole in their financials is somewhere between 1 and 10 billion. This is unsustainable. We cannot keep doing this in crypto. We can't have these entities, and they're all, obviously, FTX was an exchange, but we keep having these CFI entities that all kind of do the same lending and borrowing activities on a centralized basis, offering these outlandish interest rates in some cases, and they all go belly up and have these extraordinary holes in their financials. We can't keep doing this. It keeps happening over and over and over again. And you could say they all kind of flourished during this last bull cycle, and they're just like one by one falling over like dominoes right now. But we really need to not do this next time. We need to divorce ourselves from CFI. CFI is not good for crypto. Sure, those sweet, sweet yields bring people back every time. They bring people back every time we have a bull market. Whatever is the latest flavor of sweet, sweet yield brings people back. But like I saw a few people commenting on Twitter over the last couple of weeks, yield often just equals risk. You can't really have these kinds of yields without risk. There are some much lower risk yields in crypto. I think people in Cardano are very familiar with one of those. But these kinds of yields always come with this giant risk. There's always this big, giant counterparty risk. You've always got to worry, is BlockFi, who has custody of my crypto, going to go belly up and have this giant hole of 1 to 10 billion when they file their petition for bankruptcy? This keeps happening over and over again. We can't keep doing this. Crypto, we need to divorce ourselves from CeFi. CeFi is not even really a thing. CeFi and crypto is not a real thing. Temporarily, it's a real thing, but then it seems to always end like this. I do have to admit, though, it is probably a very healthy thing that some of the influencers who pushed these kinds of CeFi things are getting a little blowback for it now. Anthony Pompliano spent a lot of time trying to peddle BlockFi to everyone. Here's a video where he's telling you all about the awesomeness of BlockFi. Look at this. Oh, it's the future of finance. It's the future of finance. Where was that one? Future of finance. It's too bad they didn't advertise it as the future of bankruptcy, the future of gigantic holes. Instead, it's all kinds of wonderful things. Look at this. Pomp is letting you know how wonderful BlockFi is. Luckily, crypto has a long memory. Today, Pomp tried to post this: a single book, podcast, or conversation can change your life. And of course, he got ratioed so hard. This poster said, so true. For example, I lost most of my savings after listening to your podcast, and putting it into BlockFi completely changed my life. People are also really loving this video where he talked about BlockFi, the rocket ship, and how you needed to get on board. And his hand is showing you exactly what that rocket ship will do. Listen, next bull market, there will probably be new BlockFis. There will be new Celsiuses. There will be new versions of exactly the same CeFi platforms. Don't embrace this. Retain the custody of your crypto. Give me custody or give me death. That's the beauty of crypto, that you have the power to self-custody your own assets. Speaking of places where you probably don't get to retain custody of anything, it looks like Fidelity is launching its crypto retail operations. I love their little crypto landing page. They probably had like 20 focus groups who finally decided just use images that are purple, pink, and blue. Just make sure there's a lot of purple, pink, and blue. Those are the crypto colors. Use those colors. And we get all of this. And when you dig a little deeper to try to figure out exactly what crypto assets they're talking about, of course, you eventually find this in their FAQ. Will Fidelity Crypto offer more than Bitcoin and Ethereum? Additional cryptocurrencies are being evaluated to expand trading opportunities over time. As of today, Bitcoin and Ethereum are the top cryptocurrencies by market cap, meaning they hold the highest total value among all circulating cryptocurrencies. So it looks like at the start, it's just going to be Bitcoin and Ethereum. But who knows, given the way centralized entities, given the impact they've had in different cryptocurrency ecosystems, I'm not totally sure whether it's a good thing or a bad thing that Cardano is not included in this very small group of cryptocurrencies that Fidelity is going to be working with. At the end of the day, it might end up even being a good thing. For instance, if Fidelity did start dealing with ADA one day, what would happen on the delegation of that ADA? Would it end up being delegated to a bunch of single stake pool operators? Probably not. It would probably end up looking a lot more like exchanges do currently, where they just stake it to a whole bunch of captive multiple stake pools, massively hurting our Nakamoto coefficient. Finally, it's always good to finish on a happy note. You might remember some time ago, we all heard Mr. Telecom say that World Mobile was coming to the US. And at the time they said it, it seemed far off. It seemed like if you were trying to predict when that was going to happen, you might have pegged that pretty far in the future. It turns out the timing of that is right now. World Mobile just posted this: breaking World Mobile USA. James Stagg is currently covering our CBRS testing, which is taking place stateside. Tune in to find out more, and then they give you the address for a Twitter space down here. But check out this tower. It looks like World Mobile really is carrying out its plan to come to the US. I hope you're having a great week, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.